right, I think we're ready. We want to do the intro.
Okay, you started?
Yeah.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the new Sibling Rivalry. We've changed our name. We hope this one sounds a bit better. Sibling Rivalry. So, we will be talking about some political stuff today, some cultural stuff today. My name is Bridget, and I'm here with my brother Zeke. And Zeke's going to give us a little bit about what we're going to be talking about.
All right. So I know this is a bit of older news, but I do think it's still worth covering. We're gonna be focusing on the Austin Metcalf and the Carmelo Anthony stabbing that happened earlier this month. There's been a lot of commentary surrounding the incident. Is Anthony guilty or not? Was he justified? And I think for this one, what I'm more interested in is focusing on just the commentary around this. I think we have another one of these kind of like black on white incidents where it inevitably just ends up being politicized. So we're just going to be focusing a lot on the discussion around it, but we will kind of go over the case and just give our brief thoughts on it. So before we get into our opinions on it, let's just kind of go over like what we both have heard about the incident itself. So I think I'm just going to go through it. Sis, feel free to just add in anything you feel is worth adding. But on, let me pull up the police report right now. Okay, so this incident happened on April 2nd, and it happened around 10 a.m. I think most people have kind of heard what's happened. Basically, Carmelo Anthony was it was raining outside. Carmelo Anthony went into a tent that during a track meet that Austin Metcalf was a part of the track team at that time. Carmelo Anthony is underneath the tent, and he looks like he's not a part of that school. He wasn't a student. I'm not sure what he was doing there in the first place. There have been some speculation that as a part of that he was a part of the opposing team on the track meet that they were supposed to compete against. I haven't seen that confirmed. But basically, he's underneath this tent for the school that he's not a part of. Austin Metcalf asked Carmelo Anthony to leave the tent. Carmelo declined, said he didn't want to leave. I don't know how many times he was asked, but basically, he just didn't want to leave. Um, at some point, there was an altercation between the two. It's a little bit confusing about like what exactly happened. I've heard that Austin pushed Carmelo Anthony in order to leave, but you're not too sure about that one, right, sis?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that there was some there like Austin Metcalf did something.
Okay.
But yeah, yeah.
So you're as far as you're aware, you know that like Austin had done something. You're just not exactly sure what that is, right?
Yeah, and it seems like he had put his hands on him in some way, and that he possibly threw his Carmelo Anthony's backpack.
Okay. So I think this is kind of the point where we should just pull up the police report. Um, so let me just see. Okay, so I'm just gonna start reading from it. I'm gonna pull it up for you too, so you can kind of do you see it in the Discord?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just kind of starting from it's Taylor Wetzel. That's the officer that's kind of put in this portion of the incident. I'm just gonna read it out loud really quick. Um, I was approached by a witness who identified himself as, and the name is blanked out, began telling me what happened. I asked them where the stabbing occurred, advised it happened under the Memorial High School pop-up tent of the visitors' bleachers. I immediately informed Sergeant Otis where the witness stated the stabbing occurred and gave him the crime scene tape. Started securing the crime scene. I then had Blank move to the walkway underneath the bleachers out of the rain to further speak with me. The following is a summary of my contact with Blank. Advised he was sitting under the Memorial School pop-up tent, so he's talking about Carmelo, and was near the victim, who was Austin. Um, Austin had told Anthony that he needed to move out from under the tent, and Anthony grabbed his bag, opened it, and reached inside and proceeded to tell Austin, "Touch me and see what happens." No one really thought Austin had any weapons in his bag, and Austin proceeded to touch Anthony, and then Anthony told Austin to punch him and see what happens. A short time later, Austin grabbed Anthony to tell him to move, and Anthony pulled out what Blank recalled as a black knife and stabbed Austin once in the chest and then ran away. Austin began grabbing his chest, telling everyone to get help, advised he did not know Anthony's name, but stated another Memorial Track member was friends with Anthony and he could identify Anthony. So that's just like one witness testimony. So it seems like there was two statements from Karmelo. One was like, "Touch me and see what happens." Another one was, "Punch me and see what happens." And then after that second statement, Austin went to grab him, or he ended up so the witness says the Austin grabbed Anthony, and that's when Anthony pulled out the knife and stabbed him in the chest. So it's just one piece of witness testimony. I think there's other pieces of witness testimony, because when I was reading through this, I did read something different, but we can just kind of base it off of that. So as far as like the actual incident, I kind of want to kind of separate two things. I want to separate both like the moral aspect of it and the legal aspect of it, because I think when it comes to like, this is going to be a self-defense case. I think it's already reported that that's where Karmelo Anthony is he's gonna plead not guilty and like just plead a self-defense case. But like, kind of where you at on this, both from a moral perspective and a legal perspective?
I think the my opinion on it from the moral perspective and the legal perspective are pretty much the same, which is that
Mm-hmm.
Carmelo Anthony is in the wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Morally, he's in the wrong because he was in a place that he really had no right to be, and he was. It seems like he at least was asked to leave, and he denied doing that, likely knowing he was not supposed to be under that tent. And I believe any rational person could have understood where the Metcalf boys were coming from and asking him to leave the tent. So first, he's where he's not supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
He isn't being cooperative and kind of resolving the situation, and he's goading Austin into a more physical altercation in order to justify him using, uh, violence against Austin Metcalf. So I think he's wrong morally because there were so many ways he could have handled it, um, without stabbing him in the chest. And then from a legal perspective, I think his self-defense case is pretty weak. I've seen a few clips from different defense lawyers who all seem to be in agreement that his defense case is pretty weak based on the facts that are known, without having, maybe some other facts that might be unknown to the public, without having maybe the video footage to clarify what actually happened. So this will ultimately need to get battled out in court so that all the information can be laid out and judged. But based on the facts that we know, I don't believe he has a strong self-defense case. There was so many other ways he could have handled this. One of the things that these defense lawyers talk about is the proportionality the um, of the actions between the two boys. So, you know, someone putting their hands on you doesn't equate to then using force of a knife to resolve the situation. There's not a strong justification that Carmelo Anthony would have felt like his life was at risk, which is the reason why you would use something like a knife or even a gun, so like deadly weapon, or deadly force. The proportionality isn't there. A push doesn't justify a knife. Um, and then the other part of it that um, that I've heard in why the self-defense case is weak is, like, proportionality is a big one. The other part of it is, um, honestly, I can't really remember. I believe there is a term that I've heard being used, like a legal term. But one of the other things that has been discussed about this case is when Carmelo Anthony was actually caught by the police, one of the first things he had asked the officer is, can this be considered self defense? And so by even asking that question, it kind of diminishes his self defense case because if you have to ask, it kind of supports the notion that it's not self defense because really what self defense requires is the fear of your own life. And so if the question from Carmelo Anthony, or if the statement I should say from Carmelo Anthony wasn't, I was genuinely scared that this guy was going to kill me. Instead,
Mm-hmm.
if he's even questioning his own self-defense claim, then that you know uh, begs the question: was it really self-defense?
Okay. Yeah, we can get into it. I think, yeah, from a moral perspective, um, like I do believe that I think like both Austin and Carmelo could have handled the situation differently, but obviously like the brunt of that moral weight is gonna fall on Carmelo's side. Um, I think like you should have you should have just left, and obviously like you don't stab a guy who's trying to remove you from a place. There's just obviously just show me other ways that you could handle that situation like without escalating it, because I think regardless of like who escalated first, who started it, taking out a knife and just immediately stabbing him, that is like completely escalatory, and I think that's just wrong from a moral perspective. He could have showed the knife to like get him to back up. That would have been something that would have been still escalatory, but it doesn't result in anyone dying from just that one action. So I think what Carmelo did was wrong from just like a pure moral perspective. I think when it comes to the legal side of things, like because I'm not as convinced that he has that he has like such a weak case. Gun to my head, I probably say that he probably is guilty, but it always kind of just boils down to just like the jurisdiction, what state you're in, and all of that. Because as far as like him being there, I don't think that really applies here. As far as like he's just not supposed to be there, um, because I guess like my mind immediately goes to the Kyle Rittenhouse case, and whether he was supposed to be there or not really didn't that like that I don't think that really applied within that case itself. It was just like at that moment in time when Kyle, in this case when Carmelo like um, what he would say protected himself, or when he ended up killing Austin, was what happened immediately preceding that, was that justifiable self defense in that case. Where I think in this case it wouldn't be him being there. It would be like, did Austin do something like grabbing him or pushing him? Does that justify his self defense claim of him stabbing him? That I can't say because I'm not a lawyer. I don't really know. I haven't really listened to many lawyers talk about this. So I think it just kind of depends on like, is Austin grabbing him or is Austin pushing him? Is that enough to justify his self defense? Probably not, but I guess I'm kind of more like in the middle compared to like you or like what I've heard other people say.
Yeah, and I will say, in terms of him being there, that when I said that, that was more applying to morally,
Oh, the moral.
why it
Sorry, yeah,
was
that.
the moral, right? Legally, that really has no bearing.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
whether he was there or not, there's ways, like yeah. So that doesn't really matter legally. The other part of it, legally, why he would be in the wrong is having a knife on at a school at a sanctioned event by a school, from my understanding, is illegal. So him having the knife there to begin with is already going to dampen his case. And I think like you brought up the Kyle Rittenhouse case, and I think it's uh, from my understanding, Kyle Rittenhouse was allowed to be where he was. So that the comparison is it's not really a true comparison because
Well, it's just
like
like just him not being there, like his self defense claim was just. I don't think it's applicable in both ways here, because like it was a public school, right? So technically, it's public property, right?
I mean it depends on if it's a public school, but I believe it is, yeah.
Okay.
Both of their
I mean,
schools are in the same district.
okay, so yeah, I guess like yeah, because like from like okay, like putting it back into the moral like section, because I think like my only criticism I have of Austin, it feels kind of weird to like criticize someone who ended up dying from this, but I'd like because I think it's like there's like eyewitness testimony that like Austin did initiate contact there, and I think that's where I would say at that point if someone's in a space where they're not supposed to be, like you just grab a teacher or you grab like a faculty member and just let them handle the situation, because I think it does make a difference if a school representative is telling you to leave as opposed to just a student telling you to leave. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think in hindsight, I can definitely agree and say like, okay, yeah, like, if Carmelo wasn't listening to Austin, then it probably would have like behooved Austin to go get a teacher in order to like one have a greater, support and greater power in getting Carmelo Anthony out of that area. Um, but but in principle, I actually don't really agree with it because
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't actually like the idea of needing to always run to an authority. I think society would be better if people learned how to handle things, one on one, and
Mm-hmm.
then if things escalate and right, like I would have wished that if this escalated, it just escalated into a fist fight. Like I think his like maybe more historically things would have happened between two boys. Like they fight it out, and I think that's pretty normal between like young men, and and then you maybe get the authorities involved and you talk it out what happened, da 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 da. Like you shouldn't have to go to a teacher because you fear that you might lose your life. So I think yes, Austin could have handled it differently, but I do think in principle I actually don't like the idea of like people who always run to the teacher for like it's almost like tattletelling, and I actually don't think that's good in principle. I think people we need to learn how to resolve things one on one together, like interpersonally, and I think that currently in society we're not good at doing that at all, and I actually wish society would be better at people learning how to handle things one on one, and sometimes it gets handled poorly and maybe it ends up in a fight, and then hopefully they learn from that, and like authorities can kind of mediate like, okay, what could you have done better, how could you have hashed this out better, and then you learn from that and you grow and then you become an adult and then you learn how to like talk to people. But when you run to go like immediately tell the teacher because, oh well, this person's not listening to me, I think it actually takes away the opportunity to learn how to handle one-on-one situations without having to always run to the authorities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I would just disagree. Like, I would say that I have no problems with Austin like taking lead and saying like, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here. You need to leave." I mean, but that's as far as I would go. If the guy refuses to leave, I think at that point that you should get a teacher, even from like a principled, even from like a principled stance, because it's like I don't. It's like I don't like because if you're asking a guy to leave and he's not leaving, um, like I just any escalation in that I think it's just not going to have a good escalation as far as like you like trying to confront this person on your own, especially when you're not like a representative of that particular like property. Like if he like let's say move the location, it's in his house, that's different, but like in a like on a public school, I think like you should try to get that get those authorities involved, like even like when it comes to like a business or something. Like let's say Austin's like a manager at a business at something. You ask a guy to leave and he doesn't leave. I mean, the proper thing to do would just be to call the authorities. I mean, trying to like escalate it in a physical sense, I just don't think it's a good idea for children or even for adults.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would disagree. Um, I don't really see. I think it's pretty. I think like, and I think that it's just a fine line. Like, I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
like never go get the teacher or like you just fight it out until someone breaks it up. Like, you should do your best to mediate the situation again one on one as much as possible. So I think I would say in this case, I wish Austin would have done more before putting his hands on him. He would have done more to like talk, hey man, like what's up? Like, this is our intent. Like I'm asking you politely to leave. And like after so many times of talking about it, I'm not saying to like automatically escalate it to the physical altercation. Um, I think that just depends. Like maybe in this case, I'm not saying, oh, fist fight. I think I actually do think some situations call for like, yo, like, or let's just fight it out. Especially because from just my understanding of like men and like how they operate, like sometimes that is the proper way to handle situations. Because I don't know, I just feel like sometimes people need to be put in their place. But
Mm-hmm.
in this case, I don't think it really called for that. I think yes, go to the teacher. I think I'm just pointing out my wariness with saying always run to the teacher. That's all I'm saying.
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
I have an issue with that. Like, well, people who just don't want to handle, who don't want to try and, handle these one on one situations at all. It's just like they tried maybe once or didn't try at all. And then it's like automatically run to the authorities. And that bothers me. So I'm just I guess pointing that out as like something that kind of bothers me in principle. But in this situation, I think Austin would have done better trying to mediate a little bit more, maybe ask him a few times if he's not leaving. Yeah, you're probably better off just running and grabbing a coach and having him removed that way, because the only way you could remove him is physically, and you're not really authorized to do that. He Austin doesn't have the authority to do that, so he would have ended up getting in trouble anyway if he had done that. So he would
Yeah.
have been better off going and grabbing a teacher.
Yeah, because I think because like even because it like the like there I think there is like some inherent murkiness when it comes to this, and I think the main murkiness of it is the fact that this is like between two students, whether he's a student there or not, but it's between two, like, yeah, it's between two students. Like if this was like if this was like Carmelo, like a teacher at the school, or even like Carmelo and a cop, they like it does like a cop, it eliminates the murkiness. Like you stab a cop, he has to
Right,
leave. There's no murkiness. You're guilty. Blah blah blah. A teacher,
right, right.
I think you are still guilty, but I mean it's not as clear cut as a cop, but it's pretty close. But anyway, I think like yeah. So with this incident,
It,
I think. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, no, I agree with you. Like it's based on like what are you almost legally allowed to do? Like you said, the cop legally has the authority to remove Carmelo. Um, like he's the most authorized to do that. The
Yeah,
teacher would not be authorized. The teacher would be authorized to make him leave, and then if he doesn't want to leave, the teacher would then have to get a cop involved to physically remove
they
him from the
physically
area.
remove him. Yeah,
Whereas Austin has the right to ask him to leave, but he doesn't have the right to tell him to leave. He would need to grab the teacher. So there is a chain of authority that you would need to go through. So I agree with you. I'm not saying this should have led to a physical altercation, but what bothers me is that it escalated so quickly from such a minimal situation to now the death of like a teenager. And I just think that's just it's just terrible. It's terrible that it could, like, I wish it would have ended in a fist fight at maximum. You know what I
oh
mean?
no, yeah,
It's
there's definitely like so many other ways that this could end, and it is really tragic um because like a teenager is dead because of this. So it is really like a sad story. And
and I
and
just feel
I
like
think
in like a more typical, like maybe more historically, where society wasn't so like prone to violence, and I say that kind of like lightly, because I know that like historically there's been all sorts of violence, but
mhm,
like I I feel like it's been over more just causes. It's more of like for honor, and like like this was just such a small thing to like have someone die over. And so I just think that it's just it's just ridiculous. And I do feel like, at that age, like young men, there's a lot of testosterone, not a lot of control. And so yeah, like they met young boys fight. Like that's pretty normal. And so I just wish we were, you know, I wish that we were in that time where like they
mm,
would just fight it out, and then the teacher would get involved and be like, yo, because it's like that's pretty normal. Men, young boys, they fight, whatever. But like to just stab someone, That's not normal. I don't find that to be normal.
No, no, definitely, no, it's not normal at all. But yeah, I think like yeah. So as far as like the details of the case, I mean, we could go over more. I did find another piece of eyewitness testimony that said that Austin pushed him. Carmelo said the thing. Austin Austin like tried to grab him or something, and then that's when the stabbing happened. So like I said, it's eyewitness testimony, so it's not like firm. But again, like to me, I think the most interesting part is the commentary around the incident. Because I do think there's been a lot of racialization, and like when it comes to like racializing these like incidents, like with like the George Floyd case, and I think even with the Jacob Blake case, even though even yeah the Jacob Blake case, and then like even Kyle Rittenhouse got racialized, even though Kyle Rittenhouse just shot white people, he didn't shoot anyone that was black. But I think someone was like Mexican or something. But regardless, like usually the racialization of like these incidents, and I think we you and I both agree that like it comes from the left, and we don't like it when it comes from the left because inherently like conflicts between a black person and a white person does not mean that it's a racist incident. Doesn't mean that like whoever did the stabbing or whoever like has like was racist for doing that thing. Like it could have just been just two people that had like a disagreement and it escalated to a very unfortunate end. And like generally that does come from the left. This one is what I find interesting about this one is I do find that some of the racialization, not that it's only coming from the right, but that it's coming from the right at all. Is what I find interesting because I know you said that you're not like historically with these events. You're that you've like you're aware of the racialization from the left wing. And from my understanding from the right wing from past events is that they would push back against the racialization. They would say, "Oh, this is not a racial incident. The left is trying to make this something that it isn't." And I generally do agree with that even to this day that like we shouldn't try to be racializing these conflicts. But now I do see racialization coming from the right, which does make me worried because now we have two flames that we have to put out instead of just the one. So I have this Matt Walsh video that we're gonna watch before we move on to a debate about the incident. But I guess like, what are your thoughts as far as like the racializing coming from the left, the right, whatever?
Yeah, well, the racialization from the left is definitely expected. It's nothing new. So I'm not surprised. It is annoying and it's increasingly frustrating because it just seems to lack a lot of common sense and objective ability to like objectively um, like analyze the situation. I think this time you do see a lot more racialization coming from the right because the situation involves the killing of a white person from a black
Mm,
person. Historically, a lot of the racialization that came from the left always had to deal with black people who have died at the hands of white people. So I think
that's
that's the
true.
difference here. And I think when it comes to the racialization on the right, two main things. One, I think the right has become more emboldened to speak up or speak out about the racialization of just our society in general and the racialization that comes from the right or sorry the left. They're more emboldened to speak on that with like the winning of Trump and this latest election, with the increasing popularity of the right in politics. And so I do feel like the right is more emboldened to speak on these issues.
Mm-hmm.
But the second thing I would say on this is that the racialization coming from the right, I actually find to be justified. And I wouldn't even say that they're racializing it. I would say that they're pointing out um, valid points when it comes to the races. I don't think that they're racializing this, at least unjustly. I think they're pointing out the races. I don't think like when you say racialization, what that means to me is that they're finding racism where it doesn't really exist. Where I would say the right is actually pointing out racism where it does exist, which is why I wouldn't really call it racialization, but they are pointing out the like racist, like not racist, but the racist in the situation, the two races, and they're pointing out how there's a pretty big problem with the black community and their viewpoint on white people. And I think that's absolutely true. So,
Okay, well, that's interesting. I'm trying to think. Should we just watch the video or? Well, no. Let me respond to that. So when I say racialization, what I mean is that is this idea of like bringing bringing the topic of race into an incident where I don't think it has anything to do with it. So like with the stabbing that happened, I don't think race has anything to do between these two students here. Now, if the like obviously like with the stabbing, plenty of people like on the left or just commentators in general have like made racist statements in regards to like the Metcalf with Austin Metcalf, the Metcalf family, or just with white people in general. And the white calling that out, I would not call that racialization. Like I think there's a tweet. I'll even pull it up. I'll even pull up. I have some tweets that I have pulled up where oh, okay, yeah, I have some tweets pulled up where I think it's even Matt Walsh. That's yeah. So let me pull it up on the Discord, and I'll just kind of read. Matt Walsh is like calling out some pretty like racist shit that I think it's actually valid to pull up. It's in the Discord if you can see it.
yes, I can.
Okay, so yeah, so Matt Walsh says like the comments on Carmelo Anthony's fundraiser because like I think one thing that came up was that the initial like fundraisers because both families put out fundraisers for one for Carmelo Anthony's defense and then one for Elsa Metcalf's like funeral costs or something. And there's a big story that like Carmelo Anthony raised so much money compared to Metcalf. I think it's pretty even now. I think it's like Anthony raised about half a million, I believe, and then I think the Metcalf family raised about like 350,000. So like the discrepancy is not as large as it was initially. But what Matt Walsh is calling out is that there people were leaving comments after they were donating, and it is some pretty vile stuff that's in these comments. Like one of them says like, someone gave $10 and said like, and I hope we help you raise $1 million. These white people can die mad like they ancestors did. Whites have been obsessed with black people for years. It's 2025. The hate is embedded in their DNA at this point. They don't know if they love us or hate us. LOL. Too bad we don't care. Which is just like it's a pretty fucked up thing to say. And I don't know. I think it's a pretty fucked up thing to say to just like bring like all white people into this and say like, oh, white people are mad that they can die too, just like Metcalf did. And then another one says, I don't know what that acronym is, but we are defenders of our lineage. This is America, and these flat whiteness immigrants from all over the world has always been open enemies towards foundational Black Americans from day one. No more. Again, it's just another like kind of like it's almost like kind of like a black nationalist kind of like statement. And then the last one says, "I'm donating again after seeing the need for additional protection slash expenses." Which, to that comment, like both families have received a lot of like hate and harassment. Now, regardless of what you think about Carmelo Anthony's guilt, I don't think you should be going after his family. And have been a lot of like death threats. I think the addresses, their address and the work addresses of the parents were released to the public, and they've been receiving a lot of harassment after like after their like information that got put out to the public, which I don't agree with that whatsoever. But the rest of the comment goes on to say like, I'm so glad to see him get released on bond. These crackers need to understand that we are not our ancestors, and they will reap what they sow. I hope the knife made a full recovery. Justice for Carmelo. Which again, you can believe that Carmelo was justified in self defense, but still lament the death that happened from that. Like it's not like a one or the other kind of thing. So these comments, like to me, these comments are worth pointing out, and like Matt Walsh calling it out, I think is completely valid. Where I disagree is like where I start disagreeing is like when you start bringing up like broader trends of like black on white crime, which again is an issue. Like black crime in America, like I think that as a subject is generally good to talk about, but I think I really like start to hesitate and even like start disagreeing when we start using these very specific incidents to point out broader trends. Because for one, black crime in America, it's mainly gang violence, but as far as I know, this incident had nothing to do with gang violence whatsoever. It was two students that had a disagreement, and then it just escalated to like a deadly level. So it's just like taking like these minute incidents and trying to relate it to a broader trend. That's where I disagree with. In the same way the left does it, where they say like, cops kill black people unjustifiably all the time, but they'll use an incident where like a cop shooting like someone that's unarmed or armed or whatever, but that incident specifically was a justified use of force from the cop itself. So it's just like where it's like my issue is when you start like using like these minute incidents that are like kind of related to a broader trend, but you're trying to like force it in there. So that's more when I say racialization, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
But the thing is, I think this case does speak to the broader point that there is a lot of black violence in general, more so black on black violence, black on black crime, which yes, it is mostly gang violence, but um, there is a lot of black on white violence as well as black on white hate. And so I do think that this does speak to the broader point of that those trends and those statistics and just the like kind of disproportionate amount of violence among black people, more specifically black men in general. And so the thing is, when you talk about the left that racializes things and uses certain stories to make a broader point, the broader point isn't there. Like the cops against black people or the killing of unarmed black people by cops is actually not a problem. It's like it's very minimal, especially when you think about what's actually affecting black people and what's actually killing black people. The majority of what's killing black people after health issues is black people. So like that is actually an issue, whereas cops killing unarmed black people is not the issue that the left tries to make it when they use these uh, they use these stories to make a point that's not actually there. Like the George Floyd case, for example, that wasn't like that. There is an argument for that being justified, whereas like, and granted, we haven't seen the court case hasn't completed, so I can't say for certainty that the in the Carmelo Anthony case that was or was not justified, but so far it seems to be not justified, and so it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing when they point out these cops that have killed some of these notorious cases of cops killing black people, but they actually were justified, and but then they use that case to point out the killing of unarmed black people by cops, whereas like this case, Carmelo Anthony killing this Austin Metcalf does not seem to be justified and does speak to the broader point, which is actually a true point, is that there's a lot of violence among uh, the black community. And so I
Yeah,
just think it's
but
it's
it's
it's different.
but I mean
But
like
what?
so like the specific the specific like leap that each side is making, there are going to be some differences between them. But I think the similarities are there are a few similarities are worth pointing out. So in the same way that like if a cop kills a black person, the left has a unhealthy habit of presuming that killing was done because of some sort of racial malice, which it's like first of all they do that, they say that with like no evidence for that. Like the George Floyd one, regardless of if you think Chauvin was guilty or not, I think he was guilty for like being negligent in that particular moment. But regardless of what you think about his guilt, there's no evidence that Chauvin had any sort of racial animus towards George Floyd in that particular situation. I think you can say the same here. Regardless of if you think Carmelo is guilty or not, there is no evidence that Carmelo has any sort of racial animus towards white people. But when you start bringing in those conversations, or you start pointing out to the broader trend that there is like that black people as a general population, they have issues with white people, like they have racial hatred with white people. That may be true. I would even say that I agree with that. But you can't then assume that Carmelo had racial hatred against white people, and that's why he killed Austin Metcalf. So that's a key
Well,
similarity.
who's assuming that he? He did it because he had racial hatred. Who said that?
Well, you said when you were talking, you said that
I'm
that
talking about the violence, the
no, but you also point
disproportionate
out
amount of violence.
but you also point out the racial hatred that black people have for white people.
Well, I think that's borne out by these comments that you're seeing on the fundraising.
No, no, I agree, but then because of that broader trend, I think there's like an implication that Carmelo goes into that as well, which
I mean, that might be an implication, but who's saying that? No one's saying that.
but it's an implication.
Maybe that's what you're gathering from it, but I'm not implying that. I don't know why he did it. I think what I'm implying is that why did he have a knife in the first place? Why did he escalate it to such a fatal point? And I think that speaks to the the disproportionate amount of violence that you see in these younger black men. I'm talking about the violence in the black community, not really the racial hatred. I think these comments on the fundraiser speak to the racial hatred, which I do agree it exists. I'm not saying that that's what led Carmelo Anthony to do what he did. I'm saying that why is the violence? Why is there so much violence in the black community?
Well, I mean, okay, so I was just that what I just said was just pointing to the racial hatred side. Now the as far as like the actual crimes that black people are committing here in America, I mean, it's I mean, obviously it's a very complicated issue. But like I mean, so I guess like I guess let's just get into it. So what do you think why do you think there is so much violence in the black community?
One of the biggest problems is fatherlessness.
Well, he had it. Well, Carmelo has a doesn't Carmelo have a present dad? He lives in a two-parent household.
He does, yeah, which is actually very shocking. I do also think it's culture. So the music, a lot of black music, a lot of culturally black music glorifies violence, glorifies gang violence to the point where you see people who don't even grow up in black communities, especially black people who feel they need to, in order to either appeal or to affiliate with the black community. They listen to this music in order to feel a part of the community, which glorifies violence, which then it kind of incentivizes that behavior in black people who don't even grow up in black communities. So a big part of it is fatherlessness, but the other part of it would be culture. The other part of it would, yeah, a big part of it is just culture.
Yeah, but I would say that to the music point is that rap is the most popular genre, if not I think in the world, but it's at least the most popular genre in America, if not one of the most popular. That even white people and other races listen to it. So when we see like a
Right, which is
general,
why you also see white people that don't grow up in black communities trying to emulate that behavior as well. You
but
see white people
why
doing
don't we
that
see
too.
this? But why don't we see the same crime rates in those communities?
Well, because I feel like I would say because black people have been listening to that music for much longer, they're more embedded in the culture. It's more
Not
expected
Carmelo.
from them.
Carmelo's like 17 years
What?
old. He's only,
Okay, but you just asked why not are we not seeing the trends in the white community? So I'm not talking about Carmelo right now. I'm just talking about why you're not seeing it in the white community as much is I would say is because black people as a whole have been listening and in that to that music and embedded in that culture longer.
mm-hmm.
And Carmelo Anthony does have a history of fighting and violence.
Where'd you hear that?
Two things when he got released, when his bond got dropped and he got released, in the one of the news, one of the anchors had mentioned that he only had one uh, one like fight on his record. So because of that, the judge was willing to drop his bail. The other thing was an interview that a news cycle had done with this girl at his school who spoke to how she was, you know, she was pretty shocked that it would escalate that bad. She knows Carmelo for fighting, but she didn't think that he would ever go that far.
But wouldn't that Wou- wouldn't that just wouldn't that be contradictory evidence to him stabbing Austin? Like if he's willing to fight before, why wouldn't he just fight here?
Because he's escalated. And if anything, that would speak more to like possibly the racial hatred. I don't know who he's gotten into fights with, but if he had more animosity towards white people, which I'm not saying he did, but you asked me, so I'm just giving plausible, like possible reasons why it escalated. He doesn't know Carmelo Anthony. He was alone. He wasn't at his school with all of his buddies. Like that's the only, you asked me why, so I can only just give my opinion as to possible reasons.
Yeah, I guess just like because
I
like
don't think that discredits the like that. I don't think that's like. I don't think that question. I don't think the fact that he fights means like, oh, why would he stab if all he does is fight? It just speaks to his pattern of aggression and his pattern of violence. And people escalate. That's normal human behavior. You might start like like killing cats, and then all of a sudden now you're murdering people. Like that's a very common to human behavior.
I mean it's I guess it's like the difference is that I mean the psychopath like analogy is like killing is killing. You're just killing like somebody else. But a fight and killing someone, I say like those are just two different actions. The killing is like you're just
Yeah, but
killing, but you're killing someone.
why would he have a knife to begin with?
I mean, like I can think of a bunch of reasons why he would have a knife. I wouldn't jump to he had a knife because he meant to stab somebody.
Yeah, but he had a knife because he is he's ready to like to me that like supports the idea that like you're ready for things to escalate. Like I don't
Yeah,
know
but
why
I
you would have
mean,
a knife. I don't know why you would have a knife if like you weren't if you weren't willing to like to me I guess that just means that like I don't
that
know, you've just been
you're ready to use it.
pretty much
Yeah, but I guess
like why
like
would
isn't
you need a knife at a track meet? What are
but
you
like is it
expecting?
but isn't that just the Kyle Rittenhouse argument that the left makes, where it's like, why do you have a gun in a protest?
Well, because he wasn't at the protest. He was there at somebody's property because he promised to come down and protect the property
And he was gonna and he the gun was there for his own protection, right? That's what I mean.
and
That's the right.
the protection of the owner and their
Mm-hmm.
property.
But again,
Yes.
that's just
And
that's just the
and
point. Like there could be a
there
bunch
was a
of different.
protest. There was a protest and protests on the right or the left are known for escalating into violence and destroying
Mm-hmm.
property, and that precedence has been set. And so yes, he had a gun.
So yeah, I'm just saying like there's a
And he
bunch of
had a
reasons.
gun legally in a place where he was allowed to have a gun.
Well,
Carmelo, there's no need to have a knife at a school event.
I mean the legal aspect of him having the gun is that he even though he was underage at the time, I think it's legal for him to have that specific kind of gun. I think if he had a pistol, it would have been illegal for him to have a pistol because he had like a short barrel rifle that it was legal in that sense. But I guess the whole point is that like Carmelo could have had a knife for a bunch of reasons. I have friends who like carry knives around with them for like protection. I mean, people carry around guns for protection as well. So to me, it's just like
At the yeah.
he could have a knife for a bunch of different reasons. I wouldn't jump to he had a knife
You, did
because he
you
was
know
ready to
people in
use
high
it.
school that carried knives to school?
Yeah,
And the people that carried knives to school, would you consider them to be kind of, I don't know if I want to say unhinged, but like, did they fight? Were they out looking for fights? Did they seem like the aggressive type?
um
The
uh
most of the people I knew at school that had knives, like, they were like kind of thugs.
yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think cuz I can't even recall. I would say that like they probably did run in like the more like rougher crowds
Right.
if I'm remembering correctly. But again, like they never stabbed anybody. So to me, it's just like
Yeah.
to me, it's just like having a knife that does not prove to me that you're like ready to just stab anybody for whatever reason. And again, if Carmelo was carrying a knife for what he thought was self defense, and in this case, he thinks he's in a self defense situation. I mean, in his own mindset, he would use that knife. Now, again, whether morally or legally, he could be in the wrong. But if he thought in this case, like, oh, I'm threatened, I need to use this knife to protect myself, then he would use that knife. Again, it doesn't speak to whether
So it's not
he's
just having the knife, though. It's like the collection of the evidence. So it's like the the possibility that he's been known for fights at school. He gets into fights, and that he then also had this knife, and then that he was goading the Metcalf boy into touching him, and see what happens. And so it's like
mm-hmm.
that collection together. It's not just having the knife.
No, I agree, but again, like I just to kind of recenter it, we're kind of talking about the broader trend of like black violence in America, and to me, it's just like the explanations for why there's such an I'll say a disproportionate level of violence within like the black community. There's a bunch of different explanations. Like it's not one single variable. It's like a bunch of variables that's like all intertangled with each other. And like if you want to say that like this particular incident goes into that bucket because Carmelo is just like a black person, I just say that it's not even worth having a broader discussion if that's the only thing that you can point to. Because to me, I think the disproportionate amount of black violence that happens in America, I think if you have to boil it down to one thing, it would just be gang violence. Now, if you showed me that hey, Carmelo was in a gang, then I'd say okay, then yeah, then I think it's worth having that discussion. But if it's just like he grew up in a two-parent household, he was a student, at the school, and yeah, he got into fights previously. But again, to me, it's just like those bits of evidence. It doesn't warrant a discussion on like black violence because like you're relating this very singular incident into a broader trend when the only relation that you can really make is that Carmelo's black and he belongs to the black community, and that's the only relation you can make. I don't. It's not worth having that conversation. And to me, you may having that conversation. You have not to say that you're doing this, but the fact that like I start questioning the motives of people who start having that conversation because their only relation that they're making is because of the race of like the particular person involved. I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm not like obviously like I do think there are some racist people who are making this like a black crime issue. I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm not even saying that Matt Walsh is doing this, but I'm seeing the trend more publicly like on Twitter and stuff, which Twitter is Twitter, whatever. But I think that like when you start having those discussions, I think extra care needs to be made when having these discussions, and I think just in this case, I don't think the discussion is really worth it.
I don't know. I disagree. I think it is. I think it's pretty wild that like a teenager would stab another teenager over something so small,
Oh
and
no,
I
it is
think that
wild.
speaks.
I agree with that, but
So and
I don't think it's like a
maybe
black
that you
issue.
don't see. Yeah, you might not, but I think it is still worth having the conversation, whether the link there is strong or not. Like, if that's not the case, then that's not the case. But I think you can easily bring in the broader point of like the violence within the black community based on the fact that this was such a small situation that escalated so unnecessarily, and he is black. So that's like something that does need to be talked about, and it is a good question. I'm not saying it. I'm not like it could be that he's just as an individual unhinged, but like
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately he's black, and black people have made it a point of making us all a monolith and putting every single black person that's in the spotlight as a representative of the black community. And so I think it would behoove black people to stop doing that and to be more individualistic and to not make every black person in the spotlight a representative of the black community. But that is what a lot of black people do. And so unfortunately,
I agree with you, but
so
I don't think
unfortunately
white
that
people need to start doing it either.
but I mean, unfortunately, that's what's going to happen when you have the black community always willing to run to the defense of even the indefensible. And so it's like I'm not surprised,
Well,
and I think it's like when do you bring it up then? Like
well, I think you bring it up in terms of like again, like if this was like a gang related incident, then yeah, I think it's worth bringing up because I do believe that that
it's
is the
not
brunt.
just it's not just black people in gangs that are violent though.
But well, no, I mean there's a lot of people who are violent, but if you're talking about black crime and the disproportionate and a disproportionate size of crime happening within that community, I think the major culprit for that is black crime. I mean, black gangs. I think it's just
But
gang violence.
it's not just gang violence though. You see a
It's
lot
not
of like
just it's
these.
not just, but I'm saying the majority. I would even go as far as to say it's the majority of that is gang
Yeah,
violence.
it might be, but you also see a lot of these young black kids who use violence as it's like the first line, it's like the first line of defense is to go to violence, even if they're not a part of a gang. It's just if they have a dispute with another person, their like first reaction is violence, and it's over the smallest things. And you see that in the black community, whether it's fatal or not. It's like like for example, like I think you can maybe attest to this, but like there's that stereotype of like, what are you looking at? What are you looking at? And then all of a sudden you're fighting because you looked at someone the wrong way. Like that's a trope of like the black community. Like you do one little thing wrong and all of a sudden now you're fighting and now you're getting your ass beat for something that really should be so minuscule, but for some reason in the black community it's way blown out of proportion.
But again, I would say that is
It's not
just.
always gang, but
But I say that even that specific analogy is like due to like just gangs. Like I think like when within like
no,
I
I
think
don't think so. I think it's culture. I think it's culture. It's not just gangs.
well the
Like
culture
gangs
of being a
contribute
gang
a
or
big gangs contribute a big part to like the deaths in the black community. Yes, I agree, but it's there's also a mentality that you see within the black community of just pure escalation for the smallest things.
I would just relate that to just gang culture. Because
I
gang culture
don't know.
because gang culture to me is like there's like this kind of I forget where I heard this from.
The black people would call that black culture. It's not just gang culture. It's black
Mm,
culture.
I wouldn't say it's black culture though.
I would.
I truly just believe that it's just gang culture. Now you can say that gang culture and black culture is so intertwined with each other that it's hard to like make the distinction. And you can even say there's enough overlap where like I'm not even gonna fight too much on it. If we were kind of like talking about this in passing, and you said just black culture, and you were referring to like more specifically gang culture, you may be just I would be like, you know what, it's fine. I know what you mean, whatever. But I think in this specific, the reason why I'm like making the distinction now, because we're having a very specific conversation about like what is the cause of disproportionate crimes within the black community. So I think when we're looking within the community of like of the well, I'll say within the population of black people, and we're trying to find like why is there so much disproportionate crime. That's where I think it is worth to like make the distinction between like the different outsets of culture that comes within the black community. There's gang culture,
Right.
sneaker culture, sports culture. Like there's a bunch of different cultures
But
that
I'm not
upstring.
but I'm not just talking about gangs though. That's the thing.
But
Like I'm
that
not just talking oh sorry. No, sorry. I'm not just talking about crime. Sorry. I'm not just talking about crime. I'm talking about even things that don't escalate to crime. It's like the example I just gave. What are you looking at? You can look at someone the wrong way and all of a sudden you're getting your ass beat.
well, that
Like
it's a crime.
even
That's an assault, right?
right, but it's not always like recorded, right? So it's not going to be taken into account into crime statistics. So like
Mm.
there it's more that like outside of crime statistics, even just in the black community, there's such a trope of escalation for the smallest things. We see this even within our own family. I remember when Tiana and Brittany and Curtis came to live with us with Aunt Sherry, and like
Mm-hmm.
something would go down at school. I came home one day, I was like upset, I was crying maybe. Tiana and Brittany, oh what happened? What happened? And oh this I told them what happened. Oh, oh, did you beat her ass? Did you beat her ass? And I said, what? No. I was so confused because I just don't operate that way. And like
Mm-hmm.
that was their first reaction. It was the immediate thing that they went to. And then they proceeded to teach me how to punch. They started punching me so that I could learn how to fight. And it was like, so that's just one example, even in our own family, which it's more than that. Like so many times um, I've seen videos of our cousins online. Oh, that bitch, she was talking shit. Da 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 da. Tell her she keeps talking shit. I'm gonna beat her ass. Like the resolution in the black community it tends to be escalation. And I'm obviously not saying this is all black people. I hope that's clear. Obviously, we're black and we're
Mm-hmm.
not like that, but we also didn't really grow up in the black community. So that kind of speaks to, I don't know if Carmelo grew up in the black community. I would be curious if that's the case. I do know Texas has a very big black community. And so it's not just because you could have a two-parent household and still be prone to that mentality if you grow up in the black community. Even when you don't grow up in the black community, I got a bit of that just because by extension of our family. And whenever we were involved with our family, it was always kind of the expectation of like, be strong, be hood, don't let anybody, talk down you, don't let these white
Mm-hmm.
people push you around, da 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 da. And so, like, just based on our own experience, I feel like that's why I feel very certain that this is more than just gang violence. It's a mentality within the black culture,
Okay,
and
so
it presents differently depending on the black person because we're still individuals and we have different temperaments. And so some black people are going to be more prone to being violent just based on temperament. They might be more temperamentally aggressive, and some are going to be less because they're more temperamentally timid. But but that is just a trope within the black community.
okay, so I think this is okay. I think I see where the disagreement's coming from. It's that word community, because let me. So here are the two terms, and I think it's going to be really helpful to use these two terms. I don't even know if we're going to get to the video, but I'm interested in just talking about this. So there's the black community. That's one term, and then we have
Hmm.
the black population. That's a different term. Black
Exactly.
black population. That's just all black people. It doesn't
All black
matter
people.
if you're black. You're in the black population. Then you have
Right.
this term black community, and I think it's really worth to like separate out these two terms because to me there are multiple different kinds of black community, and the one that you're
Right.
talking to, if you want to say this specific black community, then yeah, like I don't have any quarrels with you saying like I have an issue with this black community in this way, and I would even say that black community is very prevalent, and there's a lot of very negative um, manifestations that come from this black community, like being like escalatory, being like very more willing to like resolve conflicts through violence. There's this term called like honor culture, where like if you feel like you've dishonored someone in some sort of like social way, then that justifies you using violence against that person, whether it be like social, physical, whatever. Like there's this kind of like mindset that like the slightest affront to your honor, whatever, like justifies you retaliating against that person through one way or another. So if you're talking about like that specific kind of black community, then I agree with you, and I say like that part of the community has a bunch of like negative, has a very bunch of like bunch of negative aspects to it. Um, so yeah, but and I think
That's exactly what I mean. That's
yeah, yeah.
exactly what I mean.
I know what you mean, but when it
It
comes to
gets
this,
risky. It gets risky. I think if I could just say real quick, I get what you
yeah,
mean because it gets risky because then you run the risk of lumping all black people together and then
exactly.
viewing people as the monolith. But I tend to find a lot of the people on the right, they, they have a they can make a clear distinction between the differences. It still gets murky because even I do it. I stereotype and so but that's why I think it behooves black people to stop doing this because it's not white like because again, I think the right does a better job at making the distinction. While they can still murky the waters, they can still murk it up. I'm not saying that that's you don't see it from some people on the right, like and again, it murks the water. But again, when you have like the majority of black people, for example, like 92% of black people vote Democrat, right? This time around, and it's even more historically, 95, 98%. Black people are very prone to groupthink, and that's a problem. And that's why I put more of the onus on black people because they have been engaging and like engaging in groupthink more And then if you even in what any amount of agreement you have, you get shunned. They won't even have the conversation with you. At least people on the right I feel are more willing to have the conversation about the nuances, about the distinctions.
Yeah, but I feel like the right is they're doing a I think now they're doing a worse job at making those distinctions than they were like 10 years ago. So
Yeah,
that's where my contention is coming from, cuz again, I'm not saying you're doing this. I think Matt Walsh is getting closer to doing this, but I want to make that leap, but I have seen people overlapping this specific black community that you're pointing out and the black population and overlapping and saying like this is the entire population's problem as opposed to like this is a specific demographic within the specific population's problem. And that's where my issue comes into, because if you want to say that there's a disproportionate amount of crime within the black population, that's a fact. I don't have an issue with people saying that. When you start saying that the black population has an issue with crime, that's where I start getting an issue, because even within the black population, the disproportionate amount of crime belongs to like a minority of people within that population. It's like not even the majority of black people in America commit crime. So when you start saying that it's in the entire population, that's where my issue comes into play.
but see, that's why I make the distinction between crime and culture. Because outside of crime, there is still a culture problem as well that you do see with like a lot of the black population.
Yeah, but I think because we're talking about this specific Carmelo Anthony situation, I think that's why I'm focused on the crime. If you want to focus on negative aspects of black culture, that's fair. But I just don't.
Well, I bring that up because you're saying you're worried about it on the right, but from what I see on the right, they do make the distinction when it comes to crime. They do make the distinction that it is a small part of the a small percentage of the black population that is committing this crime. When they talk about the majority, like when they speak more to the black population, they're talking about culture. So
yeah,
I'm just saying that.
But the cultural aspects that they may point out as far as the issues, we don't even know if it applies to Carmelo in this specific case. One thing that
but you're just talking about like you like, for example, you say Matt Walsh, you're worried that he's getting into this issue that you're speaking to, and I would say I watch a lot of the Daily Wire and Matt Walsh, and I think he makes clear distinctions between the crime and the small percentage of black small percentage of the black population that's committing it. But then he points to the broader issue of the culture that does seem to be embedded within a lot of the black population in America.
Okay, well, since we're talking about Matt Walsh, let's just watch this Matt Walsh video, because I feel like he kind of does it in this one, but maybe I could be wrong. So yeah, let's just get into the video.
Okay.
So we'll just do this one video because I know you got a hard out at in like 20 minutes, and just let me know if you need to end soon. Yeah, it's already fine. All right.
Yeah.
Which was held in Frisco, Texas. It's now clear how his killer, Karmelo Anthony, is going to defend himself in court. This will not be a trial where the outcome hinges on some disputed fact or on a damning piece of forensic evidence or the use of some clever legal theory. Instead, in the eyes of Karmelo Anthony's legal team, the result of this trial will depend on whether they can seat at least one juror who harbors a deep and abiding resentment towards white people. If they can accomplish that during jury selection, then they're guaranteed a mistrial, and Karmelo Anthony can continue driving around in expensive SUVs and living in rented mansions until prosecutors give up. That's their plan as of right now. There's just no longer any way to deny it. We're about to witness another trial in this country where, like the Chauvin trial or the OJ trial, no one is even pretending that the facts actually matter. All that matters is race. In fact, this isn't even really comparable to an OJ Simpson situation. It's worse than that. In that case, his supporters could hide behind the fact that he was famous or that the police were supposedly corrupt because of what they did to Rodney King or, that sort of thing. The prosecution of Karmelo Anthony, in a very straightforward and undiluted way, will determine whether race trumps the rule of law in this country. It will test whether anti-white race hatred is so profound and so pervasive that a black student can stab an unarmed white teenager in the heart during a track meet, run away, ditch the murder weapon, wonder aloud whether his actions could possibly be considered self-defense, and then get away with it. In other words,
so this is I saw I watched this video before, and this is like one of the first contentions I had when watching this video. Is there any how do I ask this? If Karmelo is found innocent because his self-defense claim was valid, would that justify Matt Walsh's claims here?
If Carmelo Anthony was found innocent?
Yeah.
What claims?
His self-defense.
No. What claims of Matt Walsh?
Oh, so Matt Walsh said that if Carmelo Anthony is not convicted, it would. I'll just play it again.
No. Just well, he said a few things.
Oh yeah. So let me, because I just don't want to misquote it.
Okay, go ahead.
So that the police were supposedly corrupt because of what they did to Rodney King, or that sort of thing. The prosecution of Carmelo Anthony, in a very straightforward and undiluted way, will determine whether race trumps the rule of law in this country. It will test whether anti-white race hatred is so profound and so pervasive that a black student can stab an unarmed white teenager in the heart during a track meet, run away, ditch the murder weapon, wonder aloud whether his actions could possibly be considered self-defense, and then get away with it. In other words, generations after the civil rights.
So he's basically saying if Carmelo Anthony gets, because Matt Walsh is already like, this guy's guilty, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So he's saying that if he's found innocent, that he will only be found innocent because of anti-white race hatred. Which, to me,
I think.
Well, to me, this sounds like just a repeat of the left argument. And they said if Derek Chauvin is found innocent, then it's going to be proven that like white cops can just kill black people and just get away with it because America hates black people. Like, to me, this is just an opposite argument. This is like the same argument just coming from the right.
Yeah, I could see that comparison. I think what will really matter is what Matt Walsh says after the trial. So Matt Walsh is pretty arrogant. He speaks pretty certainly, and I think that's just his speaking style. And I'm not gonna put too much like credence on what he said. I think it'll matter more because I'm pretty certain that Carmelo Anthony is guilty, and granted, again, you never know, and like depending on what comes out, I think the only thing I can think of at this moment that could alleviate him of his guilt is if he was getting jumped. Other than that, I don't see any way he could be innocent. And until I see that way, I'm pretty much in agreement with Matt Walsh. And I think if something comes out that's plausible, a plausible case, somebody, a lawyer can come out and explain plausibly why it was self-defense. Unless if Matt Walsh doesn't come out and, give credit to the plausibility of the self-defense case, then I will hold him to this and be like, yeah, you're like, that's wrong. Otherwise, I'm pretty much in agreement with him. I don't know how this could be self-defense.
But I guess my issue is that, okay, so it's so hard to not compare this to the Kyle Rittenhouse stuff, but I will start off with saying the key differences between the Kyle Rittenhouse case and this one. For one, Kyle Rittenhouse had an angel on his side because there was so much video evidence of every single shooting that he did that night that it was almost I could not see any possibility for how it was not self-defense. Because you see each person he shot, you saw the footage up to that person going up and trying to attack him. But I think where I'm going to compare the two cases is the rhetoric that we heard right where the incident happened, where people jumped forward and started saying, hey, this guy is guilty, and this guy is guilty, and this is a sign of like racism through one form or another, and the result of this case is not going to be based off the facts. It's going to be based off America's feelings on this particular race. In the Kyle Rittenhouse one, or even the Jacob Blake or whatever, those particular cases, it was how's America feel about black people? And I feel like Matt Walsh, what he's saying here, she's saying like, how does the America feel about white people? So to me, it's the jumping is is the jumping ahead and saying that like this case is not going to be based off the facts. It's going to be based off how America feels about our own particular race, even though we don't even have a clear view about what happened on that day between Anthony and Metcalf. We don't have all the facts in this case.
Right, but the thing is I agree that America does have a strong hatred towards white people. I think that claims of the left that America hates black people is just currently completely unfounded. And so I just find that the claims on either side are not comparable, but that's just my belief. Like, so obviously I'm biased, but I
Yeah,
think the left,
you read one claim and you disagree with the other.
exactly, but I also think that the proof on one side is way more there versus the proof on the other side.
The proof is way more there. What do you mean?
Uh, I think there's way more proof to show that there's a high level of anti-white hatred in America versus anti-black hatred in America.
There's more proof of anti-white than anti-black. Um, you mean like comparatively speaking? Like there's more anti-white.
Comparatively speaking,
Okay.
yes. It's way more acceptable in public, in the like media, to talk shit about white people, to talk down to them, like like
No, I
it's just
agree.
way more socially acceptable.
No, I agree with
And
that
even
definitely.
even the laws, like black people are still claiming that there's systemic racism when really they're like if there is systemic racism, it's mostly against whites and Asians. And so, and
Eh,
I wouldn't even say that that's like a large, like a huge deal, but because they're so loud about like systemic racism against black people, it's like, actually, no. There's like no real laws on the books that like support that claim, but there is actual laws on the books. Except now affirmative action is gone, even though some schools are still trying to push it through. There is actual legal arguments for like the discrimination that's happening against white people and Asians.
yeah, and I guess it's not worth making the distinction, but I guess I'll make it anyway. That it's more pro minority, getting them into those institutions, but it's just like minorities
But
that
what it
will
ends
not.
up being, what it
But what it
ends
ends
up
up
being is
being is
discrimination.
discriminatory against black whites and Asians. So that's why I didn't think it was worth
Exactly.
making it. But I think the only reason I brought it up is that I think so when it comes to like rhetoric and then like what do we see in like our media and stuff like that, I do think that at least lately there is like a intense anti-white. I would just say like an anti-majority anything. If you're even though males aren't like a majority population numbers wise, but I guess like
It's
just look.
anti-white and male and Christian.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
really
that's what.
not anti. It's anti. That's what they say it is, but then it's also the intersectionality argument. So it's like it's more of like and if you it's like
It's anti
anti
power structures, you could say, like
anti
anti.
power structures, but not even that because you could be powerful on the left, but as long as you agree with the left, you're accepted.
No, but it's more like when I say power structures, because I guess I'm just giving the left argument. I don't agree with this. I generally
Uh
don't
huh.
agree with intersectionality. But I think the argument on the left is that embedded power structures historically is they're more anti that. So like men had more rights back in the day, white people had more rights back in the day compared to black people, and Christians
Right.
had more power back in the day compared to like other religious minorities. So the left,
Right.
or I'll say like progressives,
Historically,
or
yes.
yeah,
Power structures historically, even if
yes,
that's not borne out today.
no, yeah, and the argument today is that say that those power structures, even though legally they're not on the books, that they're so embedded into the culture historically that there's invisible
Right.
forms of that. Now, I don't agree with that, but that is the left wing. That is the left wing argument.
Right. Right. Right.
Now so as far as like the rhetoric goes, I do agree that there is more anti historical power structures in this case, anti white rhetoric that we do see in our media. I agree with that. I don't I yeah, it's to the point where like it's ruined a lot of our media in terms of like news commentary, movies, TV shows, whatever. But as far as like legally speaking, I can't. The last thing I heard, I never looked into this claim, But I would say that historically, and I think when it comes to like legal, like putting laws into the books, I think the historical argument holds more weight as opposed to just like the rhetoric. Because I do think that when there's like legal structures that discriminate against certain minorities, and I think the last case that I heard of where it affected black people was like what redlining that happened in the 70s, I think. Have you ever heard about that?
I have heard about redlining. I've never like really grasped the argument of that, especially when Democrats do redlining as well. So it's kind of like a moot argument, but I
Yeah.
don't know enough to really support that claim.
Let me look it up real quick. I think it has something to do with like housing discrimination. But like basically, yeah, like so like the left argument is always going to kind of be rooted in like this kind of historical basis. And they make the argument that because it was so instantiated in our since it was so substantiated legally, it bled into the culture, and now there's invisible forms of that. That's the argument. I'm not agreeing with
Right.
that, but that is
Right.
the argument that they make.
Which
But
sounds like it was very believable to me before I was into politics.
hmm I mean, it's a very appealing argument, and
Yeah.
I think as far as like why we have such stark differences between like a black community and the white community is because of that mindset. But that's an argument for a different show. I think
Right.
when it but like going back to like these specific like incidents between like two like individuals, I just I like even if even if the arguments are similar. I know you're making the argument that what we see modern day and like the foundation that these arguments are built off of are different. Like, yeah, the right has more. You're saying that the right has more credence for making these arguments than the left does, right? That's like your argument.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
I would just say that the argument itself is a bad argument. That like that you shouldn't say that the
Well,
result
it's
of,
not
of
borne out. I would say it's not borne out, at least
okay.
in the Carmelo Anthony case.
Even
It's
I
not
don't.
a
Well, it's not. Yeah, technically you are correct that it's not borne out. Like if this case happened, I would agree with Matt Walsh. If this case happened, and every law on the book said that Carmelo Anthony is guilty, it's not self defense, blah blah blah. But you had like an activist judge that said, or like an activist juror who was just like, you know what, he's black, or I hate white people, so I'm going to find this guy innocent. And Carmelo Anthony gets like a mistrial. If that happens, I'll agree with Matt Walsh. Well, I would agree more with him. I don't know if it's like as systemic if one juror just holds it up and declares like a mistrial, but it would hold more credence to his argument. But it's a bad argument.
it's still presumptuous.
Exactly, it's a bad argument because it is presumptuous. Because I don't like it when people say that the result of a case is because of something that has nothing to do with the specific facts of the case. Because yeah, right now it looks like Carmelo Anthony is guilty, at least in your eyes. To me, it's like I lean guilty, but I mean I'm open to him being innocent if the specific laws on the books say that he's innocent in this specific case.
I'm open to him being innocent if there's facts that come out that give more credence to why he might have felt the need to defend himself to a fatal point.
And that too, like if there's other facts that come out, because right now there's no video. I'm really surprised there's actually no video evidence. Now it was a track meet, maybe people just didn't have their phones on them, but the fact that it happened in front of so many different people, I'm actually shocked that there's no ounce of video footage. I'm not like alleging any kind of conspiracy. As I was thinking about it, I was like, wow, there's no video evidence of this whatsoever.
The majority of the footage would have been school footage, and that's definitely been tied up by the cops for the purpose of the case.
Yeah, I was mainly just thinking about like cell phone footage because I think even parents were
there. Yeah.
Like, so, but who knows? Like, there's no video footage, but like, if more facts.
But it also escalated so quickly. It's like, how quick can people be? Usually,
True.
If there's like a fight, if they're yelling, and then they start fighting, and then like it was just so quick.
Yeah, that's true. That is true as well. But still, like, yeah, more facts could come out about the case. There could be specific laws that legitimize Carmelo Anthony's self-defense claims. It could be a mixture of the two. So that's why I'm like more open to him being innocent. But that's just the thing I don't like is him saying like, oh, if he's innocent, it's because of anti-white hatred, and he may have more of a foundation to make that argument, but I still think it's just a bad argument. And I think it sets people up for, because people aren't going to pay attention to this case. People aren't going to read the court documents. People aren't going to read the police report. People aren't going to pay attention to the trial when it happens. They're just going to see the headline, Anthony innocent, Anthony guilty. That's all they're going to pay attention to. And them watching this video, and especially if Matt Walsh continues this kind of rhetoric as the trial goes on, maybe he will, maybe he won't, but if he continues this kind of rhetoric, it's setting people up to believe that. And if he's found innocent, regardless of why he's found innocent, if it's even legitimate or not legitimate, people are going to believe it's anti-white hatred, and people are going to start acting from that viewpoint. And I just think people acting from that viewpoint is a bad thing.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's a bad argument because, again, I think the evidence to support the claim is just more founded. But I do think it's presumptuous. I do see your point. I feel like Matt Walsh is a little bit more responsible than the left, and that if real evidence comes out to actually support a self-defense claim, he will come out and be able to objectively recognize, okay, this is actually a stronger case for self-defense than I thought. I think Matt Walsh is a little bit more responsible, but I do think it is irresponsible to make it is what I think Matt Walsh is doing is he's making a prediction based on his beliefs and the foundational evidence that I believe is there to support his claims. And I think he says, and again, that's why I say Matt Walsh is very just arrogant. He speaks very assuredly. He doesn't really leave room for error or the possibility of being wrong, and that is just how he talks. And so I think I see your point and what that could lead to, but I think that more it would be I think the bigger issue would be if actual evidence came out to support the self-defense claim, and he didn't say anything about that after the fact. But he is very presumptuous. That is how he talks. He's very cut and dry. He does not leave room for nuance. For example, versus Ben Shapiro, who he's a lawyer, so he does tend to leave more room for nuance and the possibility of being wrong, depending on the topic. But especially something where he's not sure. He gives
on the topic, Israel or something.
Exactly. I was except Israel. That was exactly what I was except for Israel. But most other things, Ben Shapiro is actually very nuanced, and he'll give both sides as the lawyer, especially in a criminal case. He'll be more willing to be
What did he say about this case?
You know what? I haven't actually seen any videos from him. I haven't been watching him as much. I mostly watch Matt Walsh, Jordan Peterson, and then the Black Conservative, and some other guys. But I haven't been seeing Ben Shapiro as much because I think I was just kind of I was getting away from him because of his bias for Israel, and so I've been not watching him as much because of that. But plus, there's just so much shit to watch, and I've just been watching the Black Conservative because he tends to touch on all the things I would want to see. He's got nice and short videos. Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh's, all their videos are an hour. Jordan Peterson's hour and a half, and
he just did Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson. I want to watch that.
Oh, well, I didn't know that. Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, he did another interview with which they talked a little bit about Israel Palestine. That's the clips that I saw, but I kind of want to watch it all. I mean, you know how I feel about Jordan Peterson. Liked him initially, don't really like him now, but I'm still interested in when he's talking in the forum that I think is an interesting forum to talk about. I'll sit down and watch that.
Yeah.
But we are at time, so. But I will. I'll keep a lookout for Matt Walsh to see what he says about this, because I think because you'll find any racist person on Twitter, so I'm not going to pay attention to anyone there. I mean, if I see multiple different individuals on Twitter saying something, that does worry me. But what I will keep eyes out for is when bigger commentators start using the same rhetoric that I saw coming from the left when it comes to these kind of these conflicts that inevitably a racial discussion does come out of it. So I mean, it is early.
I mean in this conflict, I see your point. It's not really clear that it's a racial like that the the cause of this incident is because of racism from Carmelo Anthony. But I do think that the right is becoming more emboldened to speak about the racism that is within the Black community, and that they're using this to speak on that. And I think that's valid because I do absolutely believe that we need to call out the racism amongst Black people more. I see it way too much, and it's very troubling, especially for like a reason that you've brought up is because of the reactionary racism that it could likely cause, which you're already pointing out. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's even more important to call out the racism of the not just Black people, but amongst liberals, really. And so because I do find that the right is able to be more objective, more nuanced. They don't really engage in groupthink as much. Not that they don't do it at all, but as much as the left, they don't engage in groupthink. They're able to point out and look at the individuality of a person um, more than the left is.
Oh,
And but that might not be for long. Like you might see it increase. Like you are. I think like you're pointing out, you already are seeing it increase. But I do think it's more founded on the right.
yeah. I mean, if you asked me like 6 years ago, I would agree. If you asked me like 2 years ago, I would have agreed. But I think you are starting to see a lot more groupthink on the right. For one, pragmatically, I think if one side's going to do it, it just behooves you to do it yourself. Because if you're a stronger coalition, at least politically, you're able to get more things done. So you're seeing a lot more groupthink think within the right, at least with Trump, and like things that and like everything that like Trump does. I think there's just a lot. There's a strong front when it comes to like defending Trump's actions. Now, I don't want to get into Trump and like everything he's done. We'll save that for Sunday when we talk about his immigration policies. But yeah, when it comes to race stuff, yeah, you have seen the left. The left. I mean, I'm going to make a distinction between liberals and the left, even though I do think people who call themselves liberals, they're not actually liberals if they're doing that. But again, that's a different discussion. But yeah, people on the left, they generally do have this like groupthink attitude when it comes to like when it comes specifically to like racial issues. And one reason why the right appealed to me was because they didn't do that. I just this case itself, I think is I'm starting to see signs of it, and if it bears out in the way that I'm worried about it bearing out, then to me it's like now both sides, like even race is not off the menu when it comes to like this kind of groupthink perspective. And politically, Democrat, Republican, immigration policy, that's fine, whatever. But it's a very dark turn if we start doing that both sides when it comes to racism. So, I mean, that's why I think I mean, as far as like just like closing statements go, it may be too early to tell. Maybe my worries are completely, I wouldn't say unfounded, because I think I've seen like I tend to like give a lot of like credence and leeway when it comes to like these kind of difficult discussions when it comes to race. But the signs that I look for, it's like if there's like a checkbox and there's 10 boxes on there, the left has like filled out 20 boxes, even though they're added their own boxes and checked them off. On the right,
Yeah.
I'm seeing boxes like 1 through 3 checked off already. I'm like, okay, guys, like let's not go down the same pathway. And I'm just really
Well,
hoping it doesn't go down that.
I mean, I think groupthink is pretty normal. It's pretty natural, like human
Oh yeah, definitely,
behavior.
definitely.
But the distinction I'll make is that on the left, you see this very like forced groupthink from the leadership. Whereas I feel like when it comes to the right on the leadership side, they 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 will speak more to like the individuality of a person, and they'll allow more room for nuance and like a difference in opinion.
Mm, I would just say the same thing. Yeah, if you asked me a couple years ago, I probably would have agreed. But I think nowadays, I just maybe I'm just in a place where I'm just like I'm more biased against the right. So maybe I'm just missing something
Yeah.
on my end. But what I would say if I'm not
Oh,
including that is that I think because of this recent election with Trump, because of all the crazy shit that the left has been doing for the last like 10 years, that the right has they've kind of embraced that same type of mentality that the left was doing all this time.
I don't know. I guess I'd be curious to see more of the evidence you have for that. I don't think it's unfounded. I think I would say your concerns are a bit inflated based on
Mm-hmm.
like a very like it's like a one-off situation. If you have more evidence to support it, I'd be curious to see that. But I see a lot of disagreements and arguments on the right. I think when it comes to the racism thing, there is a bit more like um uh um um, the word I'm thinking of, there is just a bit more of agreement. But again, I don't think it's unfounded. I don't think it's unfounded. Like, just my own experience as a black person, like, black people are very, very okay. Again, I'm not white, so I don't know what, white people might talk about amongst themselves, outside
Mm-hmm.
of like when black people aren't there. So maybe I'm just ignorant based on that fact. But based on my own experience, there is a lot of racism from black people, and it's so casual. It's so casual, and it's expected, and it's said blatantly, and like, in a sense that it's like why would they get backlash? Like that's how casual it is. Like I mean, I could give just a few examples if you want, like of how just crazy it is
No, because I think
and how
I
how
mean
I didn't see it before when I wasn't really into politics, and how I see it so much now, and it's baffling and it
no,
disturbs me.
because I even like because even I was kind of like beating on that drum when we were talking about this years ago. That like yeah, there's
Right,
just like a casual racism within like the black community that is not good. And I mean, besides like the immorality of doing that in and of itself, like my biggest worry was like kind of that backlash that's gonna happen. And I mean, the evidence that I would point to, again, like is just like stuff that I see on Twitter. Now, Twitter is not real life, so I
right,
always try to
right.
use that fact to like not um like imprint what I see on Twitter onto the rest of like the right wing or just like the white people in general. Like I specifically try not to do that. But I think there's two things that have happened that have made me more like worried about it. I think the first thing is that yeah, Twitter is not real life, but it is still like a really big platform. And I think at this point, it's safe to say that Twitter is a more like right wing platform. So when it comes to like
Yeah,
seeing things that have been said on Twitter, I think I think for one, when I see like something that I see like, hey, that's like a racist piece of content, and then I go into the replies and all the comments, it's not like fighting against that; they're actually agreeing with each other, and I see all the different likes. Now, Twitter has always had an issue with bots. It's not an Elon problem, but it's always had an issue with bots. So I would be curious to know like how much of
and
that is
fake
like legit
accounts.
and fake accounts. So I would be curious to know like how much of that is just fake engagement. But I think the comments
Right.
themselves, again, those could be bots as well, but they could also be just like legitimately real people. So like I've seen the fact that Twitter to me is like a more right wing space, and as we go further and further into the social media era, like how long can we say that like what we see on social media is not reflective of like the opinions of people in real life? If more and more people start engaging with social media as we have more people are born and the people that don't use social media start dying off. So that's the first thing
Well,
is
I'd be
that.
curious, like, what about people speaking publicly, like outside of Twitter? I mean, what's your second example, actually?
So the second example was like just like what I see as far as like public commentary. Now that one is not as as the first example is not very strong because of like because of whatever we just said about like the finger counts and stuff like that. When it comes to the public
Hmm.
commentary, I think that is more reflective on what people are actually engaging with because I think when it comes to online spaces like commentary, it's no longer in the mainstream media. Like I do think we have now crossed the threshold where like the commentary that people consume, that is just online commentary, YouTube, podcasts, things like that. So when I
Hmm.
see people like or like um, Matt Walsh or like Fresh and Fit is another like very popular kind of right wing podcast that people engage with, younger people specifically with Fresh and Fit. I think Matt Walsh more appeals to like people in their late 20s to like early 40s, I would say. Um,
Hmm.
so when I start seeing them having these like race conversations. Now, the race conversations aren't bad in themselves, and when I start seeing that they're having these conversations in a very irresponsible way, and I do think what Matt Walsh said here was very irresponsible at the least. When I start seeing it there, that's where it's like, okay, now I feel more justified in kind of ringing this alarm bell as far as like, yeah, we're starting to have an issue with this irresponsible conversations on race not only being had on the left wing spaces, but now are being had in right wing spaces. So this is like the first sign that I've seen of that second example. Now, again, like because it surrounds this specific incident, I think it's just like it's more apt to see that. So I haven't like done too much research into that. So I just kind of found this as I was getting ready for this podcast episode. But I think probably going forward, I probably will just start watching some more right wing commentators just to see if they're taking other nationwide stories, like national stories, and having these race conversations, or two, if they're picking smaller stories like really small stories that hardly anyone's talking about, but they're using that to launch into irresponsible discussions on race. I haven't seen examples of them cherry picking small stories, so that hasn't happened. But this is like the first large racial story that's happened since like you said, since like Jacob Blake, George Floyd. So it's kind of like a wait and see. But like I said, like to me, boxes 1 through 3 are checked off. Now I just need to check to see if the rest of the boxes are getting ticked off as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the evidence, like one piece doesn't really, it's not really a strong indicator of like the concern that you have, I would say, and that it would really, like you say, you have to watch more, you have to kind of gather a collective and like then let that be the evidence for kind of this like irresponsible discussion around these topics, because at the end of the day, like these topics, political, social topics, they're very murky, they're very like muddy, and I don't know, like when you say irresponsible, it really just speaks to your opinion on how to properly have a conversation. But I would say there's not, it's really hard to determine what's the proper way to have a conversation. I think
But you can
people can say,
when someone's it's talking about a conversation in an improper way. I'm not saying there's one proper way, but when something's improper, like you can tell that, right?
well, yeah, but I guess I don't agree with you that it was improperly said. I would I would speak more to what's said after the trial, because, but again, I'm biased because I think it's, I think it's valid, the, what Matt Walsh is saying. I maybe wouldn't have said it in that way, which is where I see your point in like irresponsible, but I don't think that like one saying something one way, like irresponsible, not saying like saying something one way in a way that wasn't the best speaks to like this increasingly irresponsible rhetoric on the right.
Mm, no, I think I agree with you, but yeah, that's why I said like I'm not fully like, oh, this is like right wing's gone left wing as far as like race and stuff like that. Like I'm not. I would agree with you. They haven't gone that far, but that backlash I was like
Just
always
something to
worried.
look for.
Yeah, it's just like
Like you
I'm
said,
starting to see
you're
signs of it.
wait and see, wait and see.
Exactly.
It's just I'm just not as concerned because I've seen way more of like what Matt Walsh has said on this topic, and I think
Mm-hmm.
he's pretty objective in the topic of like racism, and not like lumping all black people into one group.
Okay. Well, yeah. I guess we'll wait and see, and I'll have to. I mean, I am subscribed to Matt Walsh on my YouTube. It's just he doesn't pop up a lot for me, so I think I need to actually like maybe just check in weekly, just not even with this case, but just on other stuff. But yeah, we can call it there. I think we've spoken enough about this issue. Um, so yeah, we didn't even get through half of our videos, but I think we still had a really good discussion. Um, about this case, and then like just kind of like broader level issues about like race and violence. Um, and I actually can't wait for Sunday because I know we wanted to talk about. I'm glad we didn't do the immigration and the race story in one episode because I have a lot to say about like the immigration specifically with the with what's his name, Kilmar, I think.
Kilmer,
Kilmar
yeah,
Abrego,
Kilmer
yeah.
Abrego Garcia.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure we both have a lot to say about that. But well, you guys will have to wait for Sunday for that one. But going off of that, why don't you sign us off, sis?
All right, awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in. We're very happy to have this conversation and happy to share it with you guys. So we hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you guys on Sunday for another episode of Sibling Rivalry.